When my son got married, I kept the $95 million secret just to see who'd treat me with dignity. The champagne flute felt light in my hand, too light, perhaps, for a moment that weighed so heavily on my soul. I stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, watching my son Marcus smile at his new bride, Vanessa, their faces glowing with that particular radiance that seems reserved only for wedding days. Around me swirled 200 guests in their finest attire, the crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light across the polished marble floor. But I wasn't thinking about the beauty of it all. I was thinking about the lie. Not a lie exactly, an omission, a test. For the past year and a half, since the day Marcus first brought Vanessa home to meet me, I had kept one crucial fact hidden. I was worth $95 million. No one knew, not Vanessa, not her family. Not even most of the guests at this lavish wedding that Vanessa's parents had insisted on paying for, making pointed comments about helping out, since Marcus's father obviously couldn't contribute much. I watched Vanessa's mother, Patricia, hold court near the head table, her diamond necklace catching the light as she laughed with a group of her society friends. I watched her father, Richard, shake hands with business associates, his tailored suit probably costing more than most people's monthly rent. I watched them bask in the glory of their generosity, their success, their superiority. And I wondered, when they finally learned the truth, would they understand why I had done this? Would anyone? My son caught my eye from across the room and smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine, the same smile he'd given me when he was 7 years old and I'd taught him to ride a bike. That smile had never changed, never wavered, not through poverty or modest comfort or anything in between. That smile told me he understood, even if no one else would. The question that had driven this entire deception was simple but profound. Who would treat a man with dignity when they believed he had nothing to offer them? I was about to find out. But to understand how I arrived at this moment, glass in hand and secret in heart, you need to know how it all began. 18 months earlier, I was sitting in my small but comfortable apartment in the modest neighborhood of Riverside Park, reading the Sunday paper and drinking coffee from my favorite chipped mug. At 63 years old, I had settled into a routine that suited me perfectly. My apartment was clean but cluttered with books. My clothes were practical but worn. My car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic, ran perfectly well, so I saw no reason to replace it. To any observer, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a retired middle-class man living on a modest fixed income, spending his days reading, volunteering at the community center, and tending to the small vegetable garden in the shared courtyard. What no one knew was that 23 years earlier, I had founded a software security company that had revolutionized data encryption. I had sold that company for $95 million when Marcus was just starting college. I had invested wisely, lived modestly, and watched that fortune grow steadily over the decades. Why hide it? That question had plagued me for years. The answer came gradually, painfully, through observation and experience. I had seen how money changed relationships. I had watched old friends suddenly become deferential or resentful. I had endured countless approaches from distant relatives who suddenly remembered our connection. I had dated women who saw dollar signs instead of the man I actually was. So I had made a choice. I told Marcus about the money he deserved to know, and he needed to understand why I wanted to keep it private. But to everyone else, I was just Robert Chen, retired IT worker, living a quiet, unremarkable life. Dad! Marcus's voice pulled me from my newspaper that Sunday morning. He had his own key and would often stop by for weekend coffee. You home? Kitchen, I called back. He walked in looking nervous, which was unusual for my normally confident son. At 32, Marcus had done well for himself as an architect. He had worked hard, never asking me for handouts even though he knew they were available. He had his own apartment, his own life, his own carefully constructed independence. Coffee? I offered, already reaching for a second mug. Yeah, thanks. He sat down at my small kitchen table, running his hand through his dark hair, a gesture he'd inherited from me. Dad, I need to talk to you about something. You're getting married, I said simply. His eyes widened. How did you, Marcus, you've been walking around with that particular combination of terror and joy for weeks now. Plus, you've mentioned Vanessa about 300 times in every conversation we've had for the past 6 months. I poured his coffee and sat across from him. So tell me about her. His face transformed, the nervousness melting into pure happiness. Dad, she's incredible. She's smart, funny, driven. She's a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company. She's ambitious but kind. She volunteers at an animal shelter every weekend. She makes me laugh. She challenges me. She gets me, you know. That's wonderful, son. And I meant it. Watching Marcus light up as he described this woman, I felt the particular joy that only a parent can feel when they see their child truly happy. "There's just one thing," Marcus said, his expression becoming serious. "Her family, they're different from us." "Different how?" "They're wealthy, Dad, like really wealthy. Her father owns a chain of luxury car dealerships. Her mother comes from old money. They have a house in the Hamptons. Vanessa grew up with every advantage." "And how does she feel about your background?" I asked carefully. "She doesn't care about money," Marcus said quickly. "That's one of the things I love about her. She chose marketing instead of just living off her trust fund. She actually wants to work to build something herself, but her parents," he trailed off. "They care," I finished for him. "I haven't met them yet, but from what Vanessa says, yeah, they have certain expectations, certain standards." He looked at me directly. "Dad, I need you to promise me something. When you meet her, don't tell them about the money." I raised an eyebrow. "Wasn't planning on it. You know I don't broadcast that information." "I know, but this is different. I need to know that Vanessa loves me for me, not because she thinks there's some family fortune in the background. And her parents, I need them to accept me based on who I am, not what I might inherit someday." I studied my son's face, seeing the determination there, the integrity that I had always tried to instill in him. "You want them to see your worth as a person." "Exactly." "All right," I agreed. "We'll keep it quiet, but Marcus, what about when they find out eventually? They will find out." "I know, but by then it won't matter. By then we'll already be married and they'll have already shown who they really are." He paused. "Is that manipulative? Am I being unfair?" "You're being careful," I said slowly. "And maybe a little bit wise. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved for yourself rather than your bank account. God knows I understand that better than most." "Thanks, Dad," he smiled with relief. "So when do you want to meet her? How about dinner next week? Here, I'll cook." "Here," Marcus looked around my modest apartment. "You said you wanted them to see you for who you are," I pointed out. "Well, this is part of your family. This is where you came from." "If she can't handle your dad's simple apartment and home cooking, that tells you something important, doesn't it?" Marcus grinned. "You're testing her already." "Just being myself," I said innocently. "Just being myself." Vanessa came to dinner the following Tuesday, and I liked her immediately. She arrived in jeans and a simple sweater, carrying a bottle of wine and a genuine smile. "Mr. Chen, it's so wonderful to finally meet you. Marcus talks about you constantly. Please call me Robert." I took the wine, a nice Cabernet, not ostentatiously expensive, and gestured her inside. "And I hope he hasn't made me sound too eccentric." "Only in the best ways," she laughed, and the sound was warm and unforced. Over my homemade lasagna, a recipe I'd perfected over decades, we talked easily. Vanessa asked thoughtful questions about my career, my hobbies, my thoughts on everything from architecture to philosophy. She listened when I spoke. She laughed at my jokes. She treated me with the kind of easy respect that comes from genuine interest rather than obligation. "This lasagna is incredible," she said, going back for seconds. "Marcus, why didn't you tell me your dad was such an amazing cook? Because then you'd be coming here for dinner instead of cooking for me," Marcus teased. "Smart man," Vanessa grinned at him, and the look they exchanged was so full of love that I felt my chest tighten with emotion. After dinner, as we cleaned up together, Vanessa insisting on helping despite my protests, she turned to me with a more serious expression. "Robert, I want you to know something. My parents, they can be a bit much. They have very specific ideas about things. But I need you to know that Marcus and I, we don't care about any of that. We just want to build a life together on our own terms." "I appreciate you saying that, Vanessa." I handed her a dish to dry. "And for what it's worth, I think Marcus chose very well." Her eyes actually teared up a bit. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know. I really want your approval. My own dad is. Well, let's just say he's not the easiest person to talk to. It's nice to have a conversation with a father figure who just listens and accepts." In that moment, I made my decision. I would keep my secret, yes. But not just to test Vanessa. I already knew she would pass any test of character. I would keep it to see how her family behaved. Because if they were as difficult as she implied, if they judged Marcus, and me based on perceived financial status, then they needed to learn a lesson about human dignity and respect. I didn't know then just how badly they needed that lesson. I met Patricia and Richard Ashford 3 weeks later at their sprawling estate in Westchester County. The house was a monument to wealth, not old money elegance, but new money extravagance. Everything gleamed. Everything was oversized. The chandelier in the foyer could have hung in a palace. The cars in their circular driveway, a Mercedes, a Porsche, and what looked like a vintage Bentley, were polished to mirror brightness. I had dressed in my usual style, clean khakis, a button-down shirt, and my comfortable but aging loafers. I drove up in my Honda Civic, parking it between the Mercedes and the Porsche like a sparrow among peacocks. Marcus and Vanessa met me at the door, both looking tense. Dad, Marcus said quietly as we walked toward the entrance, just be yourself. Don't let them get to you. Why would they get to me? I asked mildly. Before he could answer, the door swung open to reveal Patricia Ashford in all her glory. She was a tall, elegant woman in her late 50s, dressed in what I recognized as designer clothing even with my limited fashion knowledge. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed. Her makeup was flawless. Her smile was practiced. Marcus, Vanessa. She embraced them both, then turned her gaze to me. I watched something flicker in her eyes, a quick assessment, a calculation, a judgment made in milliseconds. And you must be Mr. Chen. Robert, please. I extended my hand. Her grip was brief, perfunctory. Do come in. Richard is in the study. We're so glad you could make it. Her tone suggested she was being polite rather than truthful. Richard Ashford emerged from what Patricia had called the study, a room larger than my entire apartment, lined with leather-bound books that looked more decorative than read. He was a barrel-chested man with silver hair and the kind of confident handshake that was meant to intimidate. Robert Chen, he said, not quite making it a question. Marcus's father. That's right. Pleasure to meet you. Marcus tells us you're retired, Patricia said as she led us to their formal living room, another space that looked more like a museum than a place where people actually lived. What did you do before retirement? I worked in IT, I said truthfully. Computer systems, data management, that sort of thing. Oh, Patricia's smile became more fixed. How interesting, and you live in Riverside Park, was it? That's right, nice little neighborhood, very community-oriented. I'm sure it is, she said in a tone that suggested she was sure of no such thing. Vanessa jumped in, trying to steer the conversation. Mom, Dad, I thought we could discuss some wedding ideas today. I know it's early, but of course, darling, Patricia interrupted smoothly. We have so many thoughts. Richard and I have already been discussing venues. The country club would be perfect, of course. We can accommodate up to 300 guests. Actually, Marcus said carefully, we were thinking something smaller, more intimate. Richard laughed, a booming sound that seemed meant to dominate the space. Nonsense. This is Vanessa's wedding. It needs to be done properly. You'll thank us later, trust me. But Dad, Vanessa started. We know what we're doing, sweetheart, Patricia cut in. We've been to enough weddings in our circle to know what's expected, and don't worry about the cost. We understand that with Marcus's situation. And Robert's retirement income. Well, we're more than happy to handle all the expenses. The way she said situation made it clear what she meant. Young architect, not wealthy yet. Father in IT, definitely not wealthy. That's very generous, Marcus said stiffly. Think nothing of it, Richard said with a magnanimous wave. Family helps family, that's what money is for. Though I have to say, Marcus, you might want to think about your long-term financial planning. An architect is a respectable profession, but with Vanessa's lifestyle expectations, well, you'll need to be strategic. I watched Marcus's jaw tight. Vanessa looked mortified. I kept my expression neutral. Marcus is doing very well, I said quietly. He's talented, hardworking, and responsible. He'll provide just fine. Patricia smiled at me with what I can only describe as condescending pity. Of course he will, and it's wonderful that you're confident in your son. But Richard does have a point. The reality is that maintaining a certain standard of living requires resources. We just want to make sure the young people are prepared. We're very prepared, Vanessa said firmly, reaching for Marcus's hand. And we appreciate your concern, but darling, we're just looking out for you, Patricia interrupted again. That's what parents do, and speaking of which, Robert, will need to discuss some logistics about the wedding. Obviously, we'll be covering all costs, but we'll need account of how many guests you'll be inviting from your side. Whatever makes sense, I said. I don't need much. Probably for the best, Richard said with a chuckle. These affairs can get expensive. Bar tabs alone can run into the thousands, not trying to be insensitive, but given your fixed income and all. Richard, Vanessa said sharply, that's enough. What? I'm just being practical. No shame in it. Not everyone has the resources we have. That's just reality. He turned to me with what he probably thought was a friendly smile. Tell me, Robert, what's your retirement situation like? Just financially speaking. 401k? Pension? I only ask because I know how difficult it can be for retirees these days. If you ever need advice, I know some good financial advisors who work with people in more modest circumstances. I looked at this man, this arrogant, presumptuous man who thought he knew everything about me from my car and my address, and I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. Not the hot, reactive kind, the cold, calculating kind. I appreciate the concern, I said evenly, but I'm doing just fine. Of course, Richard said, clearly not believing me. Just keep it in mind, and hey, if you ever need help with anything, house repairs, medical bills, whatever, don't hesitate to ask. We're family now, or will be soon enough. Marcus stood abruptly. Dad and I should probably get going. We have another commitment. We didn't, but I appreciated the escape route. The drive home was silent for the first few minutes. Marcus was gripping the steering wheel of his car. He'd insisted on driving me with white knuckles. I'm sorry, he finally said. I'm so sorry. I didn't think they'd be quite that. Condescending, I supplied. Presumptuous, insulting. All of the above. He glanced at me. Are you angry? At them? No, angry isn't the right word. I looked out the window at the passing scenery. Disappointed, maybe, sad. They don't even realize what they're doing. They genuinely think they're being helpful. They're being horrible. They're revealing who they are, I corrected. And you know what? I'm glad. Better to know now than later. Should we tell them? Marcus asked. About the money, maybe if they knew, they'd be embarrassed and apologetic, sure. But would they have learned anything? Would they have changed how they view people who they think have less than them? I shook my head. No, Marcus, we keep going with this. Let's see how it plays out. It's going to get worse, isn't it? I looked at my son's troubled face and felt a surge of love for him. He was caught in the middle of this, torn between his future wife's family and his own dignity. Probably, I admitted. But here's what I want you to remember. Vanessa stood up for you in there. Defended you. She was embarrassed by her parents' behavior. That tells you everything you need to know about her. Hold on to that. I just don't want you to be hurt by this. Marcus, I've been underestimated before. I've been dismissed, overlooked, and patronized. None of it actually touches who I am. The question is, can you handle it? Because this is the family you're marrying into. He was quiet for a long moment. Vanessa is worth it, he finally said. Whatever her parents are, she's different. She's better, and she's already talking about limiting our contact with them after the wedding. That's her choice to make, I said. But for now, we play this out. We let them show us who they really are, and in the end, when the truth comes out, and it will come out, they'll have to face what they've revealed about themselves. You're using this as a teaching moment, Marcus said with a faint smile. Classic dad move. Can't help it, it's what I do. I returned his smile. Besides, I'm curious. How far will they go? How much of their true nature will they show when they think there's no consequence? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The wedding planning became an exercise in systematic humiliation. Patricia took control of every aspect, making it clear that since she was paying, her vision would prevail. Vanessa fought back on some points. She refused to wear the dress her mother wanted, and she insisted that Marcus's best friend be the best man instead of Richard's business partner. But gradually, she was worn down by the sheer force of Patricia's will. I watched it happen at a series of planning meetings, each one more uncomfortable than the last. At the venue discussion, held at an upscale restaurant where the prices weren't even listed on the menu, Patricia made a show of simplifying things. Now, Robert, she said with exaggerated patience, as if explaining something to a child, don't worry about any of the traditional father-of-the-groom expenses. We know that rehearsal dinners can be quite costly, and given your situation, we've decided to just roll that into our overall budget. No need for you to stretch yourself thin. Actually, I said, I'd like to host the rehearsal dinner. It would be my honor. Patricia and Richard exchanged a look. That's very sweet, Patricia said, but these events do have certain expectations. The venue alone for something appropriate would be, I can handle it, I said firmly. Robert, Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a kind, confidential tone. There's no shame in accepting help. We're not judging you. We understand that a retired IT worker's budget is different from what we're used to. We just don't want you to bankrupt yourself trying to keep up appearances. I'm not trying to keep up with anything, I replied. I'm just trying to host a dinner for my son. Let him do it, Vanessa said, shooting her parents a warning look. If Robert wants to host the rehearsal dinner, that's his right. Fine, Patricia said with a sigh that suggested she was indulging a child's tantrum. But keep it small, Robert, maybe just immediate family. That way it won't be too much of a financial burden. At the tasting for the wedding cake, Patricia made sure I saw the prices. This one is $8,000, she said, pointing to an elaborate 5-tier creation. This one is $12,000. The flowers alone are going to run us about $25,000. Can you imagine? She laughed. Of course, you probably can't. No offense. None taken, I said, though both Marcus and Vanessa looked ready to combust. Mom, Vanessa said through gritted teeth, can we please just focus on the cake? I'm just making conversation, darling. I'm sure Robert is curious about how these things work at this level. It's probably quite eye-opening for him. Richard wasn't much better. At a fitting for the groomsmen, he cornered me near the alterations area. You know, Robert, I've been thinking. After the wedding, I could probably set you up with a little job. Nothing too strenuous, you're getting up there in age. But maybe some light bookkeeping at one of my dealerships. Something to supplement that fixed income. Wouldn't pay much, but every little bit helps, right? I looked at this man, this walking embodiment of arrogance, and marveled at his complete lack of self-awareness. That won't be necessary, I said, but thank you for thinking of me. Hey, no problem, that's what family's for, taking care of each other. He clapped me on the shoulder. Between you and me, I'm glad Marcus found a good woman. Even if his background is a bit limited, Vanessa will elevate him, give him access to opportunities he never would have had otherwise. Best thing that could happen to a guy in his position. You mean the position of being a successful architect with his own firm? Well, sure, that's nice, but let's be honest, without Vanessa's connections, his firm would stay small. Now, with our network, he'll be designing mansions for millionaires. It's all about who you know, and he's marrying into the right people. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Though between us men, I do worry about him keeping up with her financially. I mean, she's used to a certain lifestyle. Vacations, jewelry, nice cars. I hope he understands what he's signing up for. I think Marcus understands perfectly, I said, and I think Vanessa married him for who he is, not his bank account. Richard laughed. That's sweet that you think that, but trust me, I've been married for 35 years. Women say they don't care about money, but they do. They all do. The smart move for Marcus is to remember that he married up and act accordingly. Stay humble. Let Vanessa and her family take the lead on the big decisions. That's how you make a marriage work when there's a financial imbalance. I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. Marcus found me a few minutes later, standing outside getting fresh air. What did he say to you? Marcus demanded. I saw your face. I repeated the conversation. Marcus's face darkened with anger. I'm calling off the wedding, he said. This is insane. I can't let them treat you like this. Yes, you can, I said firmly. Because you're not marrying them, you're marrying Vanessa, and every time they insult me, she defends you. Every time they make assumptions, she corrects them. She's on your side, Marcus, that's what matters. But Dad, listen to me. In a few months, they're going to learn the truth. And when they do, they're going to have to face every single thing they've said and done. They're going to have to look at themselves in the mirror and realize that they judged people based on perceived wealth rather than character. That's going to be a hard lesson, but maybe it's one they need to learn. Marcus ran his hand through his hair in frustration. You're a better man than me. I want to tell them right now just to see the looks on their faces. Looks on their faces will be better if they've had months to really show their true colors, I pointed out. Patience, son, trust the process. But even I wasn't prepared for how bad it would get. 6 weeks before the wedding, Vanessa called me in tears. Robert, I'm so sorry. I just found out what my mother did and I'm horrified. What happened? She created a separate seating chart for the reception. She has you at a table in the back corner with some distant relatives she barely speaks to. She said it was because you'd be more comfortable with people at your economic level rather than sitting at the head table with the wedding party. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Vanessa, no, this is unacceptable. You're Marcus's father. You should be sitting at the head table with us. I already told her to change it, but she's fighting me on it. She says it's unconventional and that you'd probably prefer a less prominent position anyway. Where's Marcus in all this? He's in her office right now, yelling at her. Robert, I swear I didn't know she was going to do this. If I had known, Vanessa, honey, it's okay. I don't care where I sit. But I care, Marcus cares. This is about respect, and my mother is being, she bit off whatever word she'd been about to use. She's being difficult. She's being herself, I said gently. And that's informative, isn't it? I'm starting to understand why you and Marcus wanted to wait to tell them about. About your financial situation. So Marcus had told her. I wasn't surprised. You can't keep that kind of secret from your fiancé indefinitely. When did Marcus tell you? I asked. 2 months ago. He said he wanted me to know before we got married, but he begged me not to tell my parents. He said you two were doing some kind of social experiment. She laughed without humor. I thought he was exaggerating about how they'd behave. I didn't want to believe my own parents could be so. Classist, elitist, snobby. All of those, God, Robert, I'm so embarrassed, and I'm angry at them, at myself for not standing up to them more strongly at this whole situation. Vanessa, listen to me. You have nothing to be embarrassed about. You didn't choose your parents. You can only choose how you respond to them, and from what I've seen, you've been defending Marcus and me at every turn. That takes courage. It shouldn't require courage to defend my fiancé's father from my own parents, she said bitterly. No, it shouldn't, but the world isn't always what it should be. The question is, what are you going to do about it? There was a long pause, then, I'm going to tell them the truth. Tonight, I can't watch them treat you this way anymore. Vanessa, wait, just wait a bit longer. Why? So they can keep humiliating you? So they can keep making assumptions and judgments? Because, I said carefully, if you tell them now they'll apologize, they'll be mortified, they'll probably overcompensate by treating me like royalty at the wedding, but they won't have actually learned anything. They'll just learn to be more careful about their assumptions. So what? Let them learn that at least. But they won't learn the deeper lesson, that every person deserves respect and dignity regardless of their bank account. If we tell them now, they'll think the problem was that they misjudged my specific financial situation. They won't realize that the real problem is judging people based on finances at all. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. You want them to sit with what they've done. You want them to really feel it. I want them to have the opportunity to grow, I corrected. And growth requires discomfort. If you want to tell them, I won't stop you, but if you can wait until after the wedding. I think the lesson will be more powerful. You're either incredibly wise or incredibly patient. Maybe a bit of both, I admitted, or maybe I'm just curious to see how far they'll go. The answer to that question came 3 weeks later. Patricia called me directly first. Her voice was dripping with false concern. Robert, I hope you don't mind my calling. I wanted to discuss something with you privately, man to man. Well, woman to man, I suppose. She gave a little laugh at her own joke. It's about the rehearsal dinner. What about it? Well, I understand you want to host it, and that's very sweet. But Richard and I have been talking, and we're worried about you overextending yourself financially. We know retirement can be tight, and we'd hate for you to spend money you might need for medical expenses or emergencies just to host a dinner. I appreciate your concern, but I have it covered. Robert, please don't be proud. There's no shame in letting us help. In fact, I have a proposal. Why don't we just host the rehearsal dinner as well? We'll put it in your name, tell everyone it's from you, and you can have all the credit without any of the financial burden. Nobody needs to know. It would be our little secret. The audacity of it took my breath away. She was literally offering to pretend I had paid for something so I wouldn't be embarrassed by my supposed poverty. That's very thoughtful, I said, keeping my voice neutral, but I really do want to host this myself. Then at least let us contribute, say 75%, you can cover 25% and we'll make up the difference. That way you're still hosting, but you're not bankrupting yourself. Patricia, I'm going to host the rehearsal dinner myself in full. I can afford it, and I want to do this for my son. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had a sharper edge. Robert, I'm going to be frank with you because I don't think anyone else has been. I know about men like you, proud, stubborn, unwilling to accept help even when you need it. But you need to think about what's best for Marcus. If you spend all your savings on this dinner, what happens when you really need help? What happens when your car breaks down or you have a health crisis? Marcus will feel obligated to help you, and that will put financial strain on him and Vanessa. Is that really what you want? What I want, I said slowly, is to host a nice dinner for my son's wedding, that's all. Fine. Now she sounded irritated. But don't say I didn't try to help, and Robert, if you do insist on going through with this, please keep it modest, nothing too fancy. We don't want people comparing your event to ours and noting the disparity. After she hung up, I sat for a long time staring at my phone. Marcus was right. It had gotten worse. Much worse. And I was going to make sure they remembered every single moment of it. The week before the wedding, Richard cornered me at what was supposed to be a casual family dinner at their house. Robert, a word. He gestured to his study, that ostentatious room full of unread books. I followed him in, and he closed the door behind us. He poured himself a scotch, expensive scotch, I noted from the bottle, and didn't offer me any. I want to talk to you about Marcus's future, he said, settling into a leather chair and gesturing for me to sit across from him. And about your role in it. My role? Look, I'm going to be direct because that's how I operate. Marcus is a good kid, solid, hard-working, but he's from a different world than Vanessa. Nothing wrong with that. Hell, I came from modest means myself, worked my way up. But the difference is I worked my way up to Vanessa's level. Marcus, he's still climbing. He's doing very well as an architect. Sure, for a small firm, but Vanessa is used to more. Vacations in Europe, shopping in Manhattan, the best of everything. I don't want to see her disappointed or worse, having to lower her standards. I think Vanessa knew what she was getting into when she agreed to marry Marcus. Women in love don't always think clearly about the financial realities, Richard said dismissively. That's where the men come in. That's where you and I come in. Here's what I'm proposing. I bring Marcus into one of my businesses. Give him a job with a real salary, not whatever he's scraping together with his little architecture firm. Hell, I could probably triple his income right off the bat. He'd have security, benefits, a real future. Marcus loves architecture. It's his passion. Passion doesn't pay the bills, Robert. I had passions too, wanted to be a professional golfer, if you can believe that. But I put those dreams aside and focused on making money, and look where I am now. Marcus needs to do the same. He needs to grow up and get serious about providing for my daughter. I felt my jaw tight. Marcus is serious. He's building something meaningful. He's playing at being an architect while living off hope and dreams. It's time for him to be realistic. Richard leaned forward. And here's where you come in. I need you to talk to him, father to son. Tell him to take my offer seriously. Because frankly, Robert, you're not going to be able to help him financially if things get tight. You'll be a burden, not a support. The best thing you can do for your son is convince him to accept my help. Help, I repeated. Is that what you call it? What would you call it? Control, you want to control him, make him dependent on you, turn him into something he's not. Richard's face hardened. I want to make sure my daughter is provided for. And I want to make sure Marcus understands his place in this family. He married up, Robert, way up. The least he can do is be grateful and accept the hand we're extending. And if he refuses, then he's a fool, and if you encourage that refusal, you're doing him a terrible disservice. Look, I get it. You're proud. You raised your son to be independent. That's admirable in theory, but in practice, it's just going to make life harder for everyone. Take my advice, and I'm speaking from decades of business experience here, convince Marcus to let me help, for everyone's sake. I stood up. Thank you for the drink I didn't have and the advice I didn't ask for, but I think Marcus is capable of making his own decisions about his career and his life. Suit yourself, Richard shrugged. But when Vanessa starts complaining about their budget, when she starts asking why she can't have the things her friends have, when she starts wondering why she married a guy who can't provide the lifestyle she deserves, don't say I didn't warn you. I left that study feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, truly angry. Not at the insults to me, I'd grown immune to those over the past months. But the way Richard talked about Marcus, about Vanessa, about their marriage as if it were a business transaction rather than a partnership built on love, that made my blood boil. Marcus was waiting for me in the hallway, one look at my face and he knew. What did he say? He offered you a job, wants me to convince you to give up architecture and work for him instead. He what? Marcus's voice rose. He has some nerve. Easy, son. He's showing us who he is. That's what we wanted, remember. I didn't want this. I didn't want him insulting you, questioning my career, treating both of us like we're charity cases who should be grateful for his condescension. Vanessa appeared then, looking between us with concern. What happened? Marcus told her, his voice shaking with anger. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, fury. I'm calling off the wedding, she said abruptly. I can't do this. I can't marry into this toxicity. Yes, you can, I said firmly. You can marry the man you love. You just have to be ready to set boundaries with your parents. But Vanessa, if you call off the wedding now, you'll always wonder if you gave up too easily. If you love Marcus, and I know you do, then you fight for him. You marry him, and then you deal with your parents as a united front. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. How are you so calm about all this? They've been horrible to you. Because I know something they don't, I said. I know that dignity isn't something that can be taken from you. It can only be given away. And I haven't given them mine. They can say what they want, assume what they want, but it doesn't change who I am. The only thing they're changing is who they reveal themselves to be. I don't want them at my wedding, Vanessa said. I know that sounds terrible, but I don't. They're your parents, Marcus said gently. You'll regret it if they're not there. Then can we at least tell them the truth before the wedding? Please, I looked at these two young people, both hurting, both torn between love and family loyalty and outrage. And I realized that my social experiment, my lesson in human dignity, was causing them real pain. Was it worth it? Before I could answer, Patricia appeared from the dining room. Is everything all right? We heard raised voices. Everything's fine, Mom, Vanessa said, her voice tight. Good, because I wanted to give you this, Robert. Patricia held out an envelope. Just a little something to help with the rehearsal dinner. I know you said you had it covered, but consider this a supplement. There's $2,000 in there, should be enough to cover most of a nice dinner at a mid-range restaurant. I looked at the envelope, at Patricia's smug smile, at her absolute certainty that she was being generous. Thank you, I said, taking the envelope. I'll put this toward the dinner. After we left, Marcus turned to me in the car. Are you going to use it? Oh yes, I said. I'm going to use it as a bookmark in the book I'm reading about hubris. Marcus actually laughed. Dad, I have to know, what are you planning for this rehearsal dinner? Because if you're going to prove a point, now's the time, I smiled. Let's just say I've booked a place that will accommodate all of our guests comfortably. They'll have good food, good wine, and good company. That's it? That's all you're going to tell me? Patience, Marcus. All will be revealed in time. What I didn't tell him was that I had booked the private dining room at Lumiere, a Michelin-starred restaurant that was notoriously difficult to get into and equally notorious for its prices. The rehearsal dinner alone was going to cost more than most people's weddings. Patricia's $2,000 wouldn't cover the wine bill. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived, and I could feel the anticipation building. I had told everyone to meet at 7 o'clock at Lumiere. I hadn't told them what kind of restaurant it was. I simply gave them the address. I arrived early and spoke with Francois, the maitre d', whom I had got to know over the past few weeks as we planned the dinner. Everything is ready, Mr. Chen, he assured me. The Bordeaux you selected is breathing. The chef has prepared a special tasting menu, and we've set up the private room exactly as you specified. Perfect. And Francois. When my son's in-laws arrive, please treat them with the same impeccable service you show everyone. I want them to have no complaints. Of course, sir, we pride ourselves on service. Marcus and Vanessa arrived first, both looking nervous. Marcus's eyes widened when he saw the restaurant. Dad, this is Lumiere, do you know how hard it is to get reservations here? I'm aware, I said mildly. This place costs a fortune. The reviews say it's... He stopped, realization dawning on his face. Oh, Vanessa looked between us. Are you? Let's just enjoy the evening, I said. Your parents will be here any minute. And they were. Patricia and Richard swept in wearing designer evening wear, clearly having dressed up for what they expected would be their own elegant wedding dinner the next day. When they saw the restaurant, they stopped short. Robert, Patricia looked confused. I thought you were hosting the rehearsal dinner. I am. We're in the private dining room upstairs. But this is Lumiere. She looked at Richard, who seemed equally perplexed. Yes, I thought it would be a nice setting. I gestured to Francois. Shall we go up? The private dining room was elegant and understated, with a single long table set for 20 guests. The other attendees, Marcus's college friends, Vanessa's closest friends, a few relatives from both sides were already mingling, accepting champagne from circulating servers. Patricia pulled me aside. Robert, I don't understand. This restaurant is incredibly expensive. How are you? I mean, we gave you $2,000, but this place... Don't worry, I said. I have it covered. But surely you must have spent all your savings on this. This is too much. We can't let you... It's already done, I interrupted gently. And I insist that you enjoy yourself. This is for Marcus and Vanessa. Throughout the dinner, I watched Patricia and Richard struggle with confusion and growing unease. The wine kept flowing, bottles that cost more than some people's monthly salaries. The food was exquisite, course after course of culinary artistry. The service was impeccable, and with each course I saw Patricia and Richard exchange more worried glances. Finally, during dessert, Richard pulled me aside. Robert, we need to talk. I'm concerned about you. This dinner must be costing, I don't even want to guess. 10,000? 20? More. This is financial suicide for someone on a fixed income. I know you wanted to do something nice, but this is irresponsible. I appreciate your concern, I said. No, you don't understand. Patricia and I discussed it, and we've decided we're going to pay for this dinner. We can't let you bankrupt yourself for pride. When the bill comes, give it to me. I'll take care of it. That won't be necessary. Robert, please, let us help. There's no shame in it. You're trying to put on a good show, and I respect that, but let's be realistic here. Before I could respond, Francois appeared. Mr. Chen, if you have a moment, the chef would like to meet you. I excused myself and followed Francois to the kitchen, where Chef Laurent, whose restaurants had collected 5 Michelin stars across 3 establishments, was waiting. Mr. Chen, I wanted to personally thank you for dining with us this evening. The menu we created together was a pleasure to execute. The pleasure was mine, Chef. Everything was perfect. I understand the young couple is getting married tomorrow. My congratulations to them and to you. He shook my hand warmly. I hope we'll see you again soon. When I returned to the dining room, I found everyone beginning to gather their things. Patricia intercepted me. The bill, Robert, please let us take care of it. It's already been taken care of, I assured her. But how did you? She looked genuinely distressed. Robert, please tell me you didn't take out a loan for this. Or worse, use credit cards, the interest alone. Patricia. I put a hand on her arm. Please just trust me when I say it's handled, and thank you for coming. It meant a lot to Marcus and Vanessa. The ride home with Marcus was quiet until he finally spoke. That dinner cost at least $30,000, probably more. Somewhere in that range, I confirmed. And you're going to let them stew about it until tomorrow. I'm going to let them reveal one more time how they judge people based on perceived financial status. They could have simply accepted that I wanted to do something nice for my son. Instead, they assumed incompetence, irresponsibility, and financial suicide. Even in their concern, they were condescending. When are you going to tell them? Tomorrow, after the ceremony. During the reception, I think, when everyone's feeling good and the truth will have the most impact. Marcus was silent for a moment. You know they're going to hate themselves. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they'll just hate me for teaching them a lesson. Either way, the lesson needs to be taught. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect late spring day that seems designed for celebrations. I dressed in my best suit, not new, but well-maintained, and drove to the country club where the ceremony would be held. The grounds were spectacular, with gardens in full bloom and views of rolling hills in the distance. Patricia had spared no expense. The ceremony space was decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers. The chairs were covered in white silk. A string quartet played classical music as guests arrived. I took my seat in the front row on the groom's side. Across the aisle, I could see Richard's business associates and Patricia's society friends filling the bride's side, all of them dripping in jewelry and designer clothes. I spotted Patricia near the entrance, looking resplendent in a champagne-colored gown. She saw me and hurried over. "Robert, we need to talk about last night." She looked genuinely worried. "Richard and I barely slept. We're so concerned about what that dinner cost you. We've decided that we're going to reimburse you. We can't let you—" "Patricia, please, today is about Marcus and Vanessa. Let's not discuss finances at a wedding." "But Robert, after the ceremony," I said firmly. "We can discuss it then, but not now. Let's focus on the happy couple." She looked like she wanted to argue, but finally nodded and moved away. The ceremony was beautiful. Vanessa was radiant in her wedding gown, and Marcus looked happier than I'd ever seen him. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of partnership, respect, and love that brought tears to many eyes, including mine. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, when they kissed to thunderous applause, I felt a surge of joy so powerful it washed away all the complicated emotions of the past months. Whatever happened next, whatever revelations came, my son had married a woman who loved him. That was what mattered. The reception was held in the country club's grand ballroom, another showcase of Patricia's exacting standards. The centerpieces alone probably cost more than my monthly rent. The band was a well-known group that usually played at high society functions. The champagne flowed freely. I found my assigned seat still at that table in the back corner, despite Vanessa's protests, but I didn't mind. I was content to watch the celebration unfold, to see Marcus dance with his new wife, to witness the beginning of their new life together. About an hour into the reception, during a lull in the festivities, Patricia found me again. "Robert, please. We need to settle this matter of the rehearsal dinner. Richard has his checkbook. We want to reimburse you for at least half, if not all of it. We've been feeling terrible about this all day." "Why?" I asked simply. She blinked. "What do you mean, why? Because you clearly spent money you couldn't afford on that dinner, because we're worried about you, because we feel responsible for letting you overextend yourself like that." "Patricia, what if I told you I could afford it?" "Robert, please don't be proud. We know your situation. We know you're retired on a fixed income. We know you drive an old car and live in a modest apartment. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but let's be realistic about what you know," I interrupted gently, "is what you've assumed based on appearances. You've never actually asked me about my financial situation. You've simply decided what it must be based on how I dress and where I live." Richard appeared beside his wife, having overheard the conversation. "Robert, we're trying to help you. Why are you being so stubborn about this?" "I'm not being stubborn, I'm being honest. You've spent the past year and a half treating me like a charity case, offering me jobs and money and help, all based on assumptions. You've never once considered that your assumptions might be wrong." "What are you saying?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I'm saying that I'm not who you think I am." "Then who are you?" Richard demanded, his voice rising slightly. I stood up, suddenly tired of the game, ready to end it once and for all. "My name is Robert Chen. 23 years ago, I founded Chen Secure, a data encryption company. 7 years after that, I sold it to TechCorp for $95 million. I've been living off the investments from that sale ever since. I'm currently worth approximately $112 million, give or take a few million depending on the market." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia's face went white. Richard's mouth actually fell open. "You're what?" Patricia finally managed. "I'm wealthy, very wealthy. I chose to live modestly because I prefer it that way. I dress simply because designer clothes don't interest me. I drive an old car because it runs perfectly well. I live in a small apartment because I don't need anything bigger. But make no mistake, I could buy and sell most of the people in this room, including you." "But why?" Richard looked genuinely confused. "Why would you hide something like that?" "Because I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you thought had nothing to offer you. I wanted to see if you'd extend respect and dignity to a person based on who they were, not what they had. And you failed that test, Richard. Both of you did, spectacularly." Patricia sank into a chair, her face a mask of horror as realization dawned. "Oh my God, everything we said, everything we did. Every offer of help," I continued relentlessly. "Every pitying look. Every assumption about my financial incompetence. Every suggestion that Marcus had married up and should be grateful. Every condescending comment about my fixed income and my need to be careful about expenses. I remember all of it." "Robert, we didn't mean—" Richard started. "You meant exactly what you said. You meant every word. You just didn't realize I was capable of remembering it or that there would be consequences." Marcus appeared at my side, slipping his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, everyone's starting to notice." And they were. The conversation had drawn attention. Guests were starting to gather to listen to watch this drama unfold. "Let them notice," I said. "Let everyone hear this, because this isn't just about me. This is about how we treat people. This is about dignity and respect and the fundamental human value that exists regardless of bank accounts or job titles or zip codes." I turned back to Patricia and Richard, who both looked like they wanted to disappear. "For 18 months, you've treated me like I was beneath you, like I was someone to be pitied and managed and helped. You offered me jobs, money, advice, all from a position of assumed superiority. You never once thought to ask me about my life, my career, my accomplishments. You just assumed that because I didn't flash wealth, I didn't have any." "We're sorry," Patricia whispered. "Robert, we're so sorry." "Are you sorry for what you did, or are you sorry that you got caught?" She didn't answer. I looked around at the assembled guests, many of them Patricia and Richard's wealthy friends, all of them watching this confrontation with rapt attention. "Here's what I want you all to understand," I said, raising my voice slightly so everyone could hear. "Wealth doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just makes you wealthier. The way you treat people who you think have less than you, that reveals your character. That shows who you really are." I turned back to Richard. "You offered me a bookkeeping job. You suggested I give up my retirement to work for you. You implied I was a financial burden to my son, all because you assumed I was poor. What does that say about how you view poor people? That they're incompetent, that they're less than, that they should be grateful for whatever scraps the wealthy throw their way?" Richard's face was red now, whether from shame or anger I couldn't tell. "And you," I addressed Patricia. "You tried to give me money for the rehearsal dinner because you assumed I couldn't afford it. You segregated me at the wedding reception because you thought I'd be more comfortable with people at my economic level. You literally created a hierarchy of human worth based on perceived income. What does that say about your values?" "We were trying to be kind," Patricia said weakly. "Kindness is treating people with dignity regardless of their circumstances. What you did was condescension masquerading as charity. You wanted to feel good about helping the less fortunate, but you never stopped to wonder if your help was needed or wanted. You never considered that your assumptions might be wrong. You just acted on your prejudices and called it kindness." Vanessa appeared then, her face tear-stained but resolute. She stood beside me, facing her parents. "Mom, Dad, Robert is right. I've watched you treat him terribly for months. I've defended you, made excuses, told myself you meant well, but you didn't mean well. You meant to put him in his place. You meant to establish a hierarchy with yourselves at the top. And when he didn't act appropriately grateful, you got frustrated." "Vanessa, please," Patricia reached for her daughter. "You have to understand. I do understand. I understand that you judge people based on wealth. I understand that you think money equals worth. I understand that you've taught me these same toxic values, and I'm ashamed of myself for not seeing it sooner." She took Marcus's hand. "But I'm learning now from Robert, from Marcus, from people who know that dignity isn't something you buy, it's something you give and receive through respect and basic human decency." Richard found his voice finally. "This is ridiculous, so we made some assumptions. So what? Robert, you deliberately deceived us. You set us up." "What does that say about your character?" "It says I wanted to teach you a lesson," I replied. "And clearly it was a lesson you desperately needed, because even now you're more angry at me for the deception than ashamed of your own behavior. You humiliated us." "No, Richard, you humiliated yourselves. I just gave you enough rope and watched you hang yourself with it. Every condescending comment, every pitying look, every assumption, those were your choices. I just created the circumstances where you'd reveal your true nature." The crowd around us had grown larger. I could see some people nodding in agreement, others looking uncomfortable, still others trying to process what they were hearing. Francois appeared at the edge of the crowd, catching my eye. I had invited him to the wedding, a small gesture of thanks for his help with the rehearsal dinner. "If I may," Francois said, stepping forward. "I've been in the service industry for 30 years. I've served royalty and billionaires and celebrities. And I can tell you that how people treat those they perceive as beneath them, that tells you everything about their character. Mr. Chen treated every member of my staff with respect and courtesy, even though he could have snapped his fingers and demanded anything. These two," he gestured at Patricia and Richard, "have been to our restaurant twice. Both times they were rude to servers, demanding to managers, and left terrible tips despite excellent service. Wealth without grace is just greed with a bank account." Patricia looked like she might faint. Richard looked like he might explode. "This is a wedding," Richard said through clenched teeth. "You're ruining your son's wedding with this stunt." "Actually," Marcus said, stepping forward to stand beside me, "this wedding is perfect, because today my wife and I are starting our marriage with the truth. We're starting it with a clear understanding of what matters: character, respect, love, and dignity." We're starting it by establishing boundaries with people who don't share those values, even if those people are family. Marcus, Patricia pleaded, you can't be serious. We're your family now. You can't just cut us off because of this. I'm not cutting you off, Marcus said. But I am making it clear that Vanessa and I will not tolerate disrespect toward my father or anyone else. We will not be part of a value system that judges people by their bank accounts. And we will not raise our future children to think that wealth equals worth. Well said, son, I said quietly. Patricia was crying now, mascara running down her face. I don't know what you want from us. What do you want us to say? I want you to understand, I said, my anger finally giving way to something closer to sadness. I want you to truly grasp what you've done and why it was wrong. Not because you misjudged my financial situation, but because you judge people at all based on finances. I want you to look at every server, every store clerk, every janitor you encounter and treat them with the same respect you'd give to a millionaire. Because they deserve it. Because they're human beings with inherent worth. And if we can't, Richard asked bitterly, then Vanessa and Marcus will have to decide what kind of relationship they want with you going forward. But that's their choice to make, not mine. I looked around at the assembled crowd, some sympathetic, some scandalized, all of them having witnessed something they'd probably talk about for years. I didn't plan this to be cruel, I said, addressing everyone. I planned it to be instructive. We live in a world that constantly tells us that wealth equals worth, that money equals character, that bank accounts determine human value. But it's a lie. The richest person in this room might be the poorest in spirit. The person with the least in their wallet might be the wealthiest in kindness. We need to remember that. We need to treat every person we meet as if they matter because they do. I turned back to Patricia and Richard one last time. I hope you learn from this. I hope you change. For your own sake and for Vanessa's sake. Because the alternative is a life lived in a bubble of privilege, surrounded by people who respect your money but don't respect you, and that's a very lonely way to live. With that, I walked away, Marcus and Vanessa following close behind. Behind me, I could hear the murmur of conversation rising, the gasps and whispers and shocked reactions. I had done what I set out to do. The question was, would it matter? The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Some guests avoided me, uncomfortable with the confrontation they'd witnessed. Others approached to shake my hand, to thank me for speaking truth, to share their own stories of being judged or dismissed based on appearances. Patricia and Richard left early, pleading headaches. I suspected they were simply unable to face the scrutiny and whispered conversations that followed them around the room. But Marcus and Vanessa stayed, danced, celebrated their marriage with joy and love and laughter. Watching them, I felt at peace with what I'd done. Later that night, after the reception had ended and the guests had departed, Marcus and Vanessa came to say goodbye before leaving for their honeymoon. Dad, Marcus said, hugging me tightly, thank you for everything, for the lesson, for the support, for standing up for dignity and respect. You're welcome, but Marcus, the real test comes now. Your in-laws have been humiliated publicly. They're going to need time to process that. They may lash out. They may try to drive a wedge between you and Vanessa. You two need to present a united front. We will, Vanessa promised. She hugged me too, whispering, thank you for showing me what real character looks like, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. You saw it when it mattered, I assured her. That's what counts. After they left, I drove home to my small apartment in my old Honda Civic, still wearing my not-quite-new suit. I looked around at my modest surroundings, at my cluttered bookshelves and comfortable furniture and small kitchen, and I felt profoundly grateful. I had $95 million, but I also had my integrity, my dignity, and my son's respect. And I knew which of those things I valued more. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the wedding reception spread like ripples in a pond. Patricia called me 3 days after the wedding, her voice small and broken. Robert, I need to apologize. Really apologize, not just because I got caught, but because I understand now what I did. I've been thinking about every interaction we had, every assumption I made, every condescending comment, and I'm ashamed, truly ashamed. I appreciate that, Patricia. I want you to know that I've started volunteering at a homeless shelter. I'm trying to put myself in situations where I have to interact with people who have less than me, where I have to confront my own prejudices and judgments. It's hard. It's uncomfortable, but I think I need it. That's good, I said, genuinely surprised. That's a start. He's struggling more, he's angry at you, at himself, at the situation. He thinks you went too far, that you were cruel and manipulative. He's not ready to look at his own behavior yet. That's his choice to make. I know, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better, for Vanessa, for myself. For all the people I've hurt with my arrogance and my assumptions. We talked for another hour, and by the end of the conversation, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that people could change, that lessons could be learned, that growth was possible even for those who seemed set in their ways. Richard never called. But 6 months later, Vanessa told me that her father had quietly started funding scholarships for underprivileged students interested in business. He hadn't made a public announcement. He hadn't sought recognition. He was just doing it, perhaps trying in his own way to make amends. It wasn't a conversation or an apology, but it was something. A year after the wedding, Marcus and Vanessa hosted a small dinner party at their new home. Just family, me, Patricia, Richard, and Vanessa's younger brother whom I'd barely met during the wedding chaos. The atmosphere was careful at first, everyone treading lightly around the elephant in the room. But gradually, as the evening progressed, something shifted. Richard spoke to me directly, looking me in the eye. "Robert, I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding about dignity and respect, and I realized that I've spent most of my life confusing net worth with self-worth. I judged people based on what they had, not who they were, and in doing so, I diminished both them and myself." "That takes courage to admit," I said. "It takes humiliation, you mean?" "You were right. I needed to be humiliated. I needed to face what I'd become." He paused. "I'm not going to pretend I'm a changed man overnight, but I'm trying to see people differently, to treat them differently. It's a work in progress." "We're all works in progress," I said. "The important thing is that we keep working." Patricia reached across the table and took my hand. "Robert, I want to thank you. I know that sounds strange, thanking someone for exposing your worst qualities. But you did Vanessa a favor. You did all of us a favor. You held up a mirror and forced us to look at our reflections. That's a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at the time." As the evening continued, I watched Marcus and Vanessa together, the easy affection, the shared glances, the partnership that had only deepened over the past year. They had weathered the storm. They had set boundaries with her parents while still maintaining a relationship. They had built something strong and true. And I realized that my experiment, my test, my lesson, whatever you wanted to call it, had achieved something I hadn't quite anticipated. It hadn't just exposed Patricia and Richard's prejudices. It had forced everyone involved to examine their values, their assumptions, their treatment of others, including me. Because in setting up this elaborate deception, in watching and waiting and judging, I had been making my own assumptions. I had assumed that Patricia and Richard were incapable of change, that they would never see beyond their privilege and prejudice. I had been proven wrong. They were changing, slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. 2 years after the wedding, on what would become an annual tradition, I hosted another dinner at Lumiere. This time, everyone knew who I was and what I could afford. But that wasn't why they came. They came because I had invited them. Because they valued the conversation, the connection, the relationships we had built through struggle and truth. Patricia and Richard arrived dressed simply, not ostentatiously, not trying to impress. They greeted Francois warmly and tipped the coat check attendant generously. During dinner, Richard told a story about one of his employees, a young man from a difficult background who had worked his way up from washing cars to sales manager. "I almost didn't hire him," Richard admitted. "He came to the interview in clothes that were clean but worn. His shoes were scuffed. He didn't have the polish I usually looked for, but something made me give him a chance. And you know what? He's my best salesman now. He works harder, cares more, and treats every customer with genuine respect, something my more polished hires never quite mastered." "What changed your mind?" I asked. "What made you give him a chance?" Richard looked at me directly. "I remembered a man who came to my daughter's wedding in an old suit and scuffed shoes. A man I dismissed and underestimated. And I thought maybe I should judge people by their character instead of their appearance. Maybe I should give this kid the same chance I should have given you from the beginning." Patricia nodded. "I've been volunteering at the shelter for 2 years now. I've met people who lost everything through no fault of their own. People who are brilliant and kind and hardworking but just had bad luck. People who deserve respect and dignity regardless of their bank accounts. And every week I think about how I treated you, Robert, how I judged you, and I try to do better." "You are doing better," Vanessa said, tears in her eyes. "Both of you, I'm proud of you." Marcus raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast to dignity, to respect, to treating every person we meet as if they matter because they do, and to my father who taught us all a lesson we desperately needed to learn." Everyone raised their glasses, including me, but I proposed my own toast. To growth, to change, to the courage it takes to admit we were wrong and the strength it takes to do better, to all of us works in progress trying to be more than we were yesterday. As we clinked glasses and drank to those words, I felt something profound settle in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, but something deeper. Peace, understanding, hope. I had set out to teach a lesson about dignity and respect. But in the process, I had learned something too, that people are capable of change, that redemption is possible, that even the most deeply held prejudices can be challenged and overcome. I still lived in my small apartment. I still drove my old car. I still dressed simply and lived modestly. But now, when people saw me, they saw not just what I appeared to be, but the fullness of who I was. And more importantly, Patricia and Richard were learning to see others that way too. To look past appearances and assumptions to the human being beneath. To extend dignity and respect freely, not as something earned through wealth or status, but as a fundamental right of being human. That was the real lesson. Not that wealth should be hidden or flaunted, but that it shouldn't matter in how we treat each other. Every person, rich or poor, powerful or powerless, impressive or ordinary, deserves to be seen, valued, and respected. That's what I learned from keeping my $95 million secret, and that's what I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. If this story made you think about how you treat people, about the assumptions you make, about the value you assign to others based on appearances rather than character, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on how you looked or what people assumed about you? Have you caught yourself making those same judgments about others? These are difficult questions, but important ones, because how we treat people when we think they have nothing to offer us, that reveals our true character. And recognizing that truth is the first step toward becoming better versions of ourselves. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content about dignity, respect, and the lessons life teaches us, please consider subscribing to the channel. And remember, every person you meet carries their own story, their own struggles, their own worth. Treat them accordingly. Until next time, remember that dignity isn't something we should have to prove. It's something we should freely give and gratefully receive in every interaction every day.